everyone, and welcome back to Lady Jane Books. Today I'm doing the Horror of 2020 book tag. I was tagged by my buddy John at Books of Blood, who has the coolest collection of horror movies and horror books. You gotta just see it for yourself. I'm gonna link him in the description box below. Go check out his channel. It's really something. So thank you, John, for tagging me in this video. So let's get started. I think the way this tag is set up is kind of like a word association game where there's only one word in the tag that relates to 2020, and then you kind of associate a book that goes with it. So we're gonna do it that way, okay? Number 1, pandemic. For this one, I'm going with Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King and Owen King. This is one of my January horror books of the month, although it's a chunky book, oh my goodness. But it basically deals with a virus or a sickness that affects all the women in this universe, or in where the story's taking place. And basically all the women go to sleep and they become like wrapped in a type of cocoon that if they break, it turns violent or something weird. So basically all the men are having to deal with making their own society without women and what that means. So I think this sounds so cool. I'm so excited to read it. I started it a few years ago and only got within like 10 pages, but I remember I loved it up until that point. So I'm excited to read this. So for pandemic, I am going with Sleeping Beauties by Stephen King and Owen King. Number 2, politics. For this one, I'm going to associate Dolores Claiborne for a very small thread that I believe the inspector who was investigating Dolores wanted her to be guilty because it would have looked better on his track record, which to me smells of politics. So I'm going to go with this one. For those who are not familiar, Dolores Claiborne is about a woman in Maine who is accused of murdering her wealthy employer, Vera Donovan. And while she's being interrogated by police, she goes on basically this monologue and this stream of consciousness talking about her life story, everything from her crumbling marriage to the death of her husband to her relationship with her daughter. It's really, really good. I loved it. I read this in like a day flat of being a slow reader, and it's a lot of fun. It's a good psychological thriller. So for politics, I'm going with Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. 3, hate. For this one, I'm going with a book I actually hated instead of a book that made me feel hate because of the story itself. And that is, no surprise, The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon. I hated this book. This book takes place in Vermont. It toggles back and forth between the early 1900s and the present day. In the early 1800s, a woman was found dead in a field, shaved of all of her skin, and it was kind of an unsolved mystery around the town. And in the present, there is a young girl living in this woman's house. And she's starting to discover some secrets when the woman's diary is discovered under the floorboards. That makes it sound a lot more interesting than it actually is. I really disliked this book. I thought it was a kind of a ripoff. I do talk about this book rather extensively for someone who hates it on my channel. I hated it. I thought it was a ripoff of other really great work. So The Winter People by Jennifer McMahon is definitely a book that I hated. Number 4, The End of Times. I don't read too much apocalyptic fiction, especially now after 2020 happened. I'm not going to be reading that anytime soon. But what comes to mind is The Long Walk by Stephen King, which he wrote under Richard Bachman. And The Long Walk is about kind of this post-apocalyptic world where I think the United States became like a military government type of thing, or police government. I don't remember. I read this a long time ago. But basically it chronicles a long walk that all the teenage boys have to do every season, and they have to keep up a certain pace or else there are dire consequences of opting out or falling behind. So That's the only thing that I could really think of for this tag. The Long Walk by Stephen King for the End of Times. Number 5, crime. For this one, I'm definitely going with The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy by Elizabeth and Molly Kendall. I read this last year. I absolutely loved it. It's basically a memoir from Ted Bundy's former lover, Elizabeth Kendall. Longtime girlfriend, I should say. It really gives a great insight into the relationship and its dynamics and how it ran parallel to the things that he was doing at the time. I loved it. I thought it was so good, way better than The Stranger Beside Me. Highly recommend it. Oh my goodness, it was really good. So for true crime, I'm definitely going with The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy by Elizabeth and Molly Kendall. And number 6, Hope. For Hope, I'm going with Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. I loved this book. I thought it was so fun, so interesting, really dynamic. And the ending was so satisfying that it really gave me hope for the characters and for the dynamics within this book. This book chronicles the marriage and relationship between a man and woman who are seemingly perfect. He's a successful lawyer, she's a gorgeous woman who has a devoted husband, but behind closed doors, things may not be all that they seem. I love this book. I thought it was so cool, really interesting, and it was one of my favorite books of 2020. And now I am going to tag some people. I'm going to tag Uptown Horror Reviews, David's Book Reviews, and Dark Between Pages. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. For this one, oh, glare alert, glare alert. For this one, I'm definitely going with not Stephen King. Stephen King didn't write this, Jane. Oh my goodness, what's going on? What's in this glass? It's water. Just so everybody knows. So for true crime, I'm definitely going to go with not The Stranger Beside Me. You just said that, Jane. You just said you didn't like it. What's going on? But and the ending was one of the most satisfying pieces of literature that I have ever had. That sounds weird. That sounds bad. Don't say that, Jane.